Revenge with Karen.
The office smelled like ozone and burned coffee filters the day I realized I didn't exist anymore. I just finished patching a silent failover on our logistics hub. Quiet, quick, didn't even trip an alert. Saved the company about 1.4 million in potential downtime. No one noticed. No one said thanks. But that's how it always was. 27 years of keeping North Range systems stitched together with duct tape, quiet code, a prayer to the ghost of Bell Labs. I didn't do it for applause. I did it because if I didn't, no one else could. Every morning for the last decade, I got in before the lights kicked on, booted the mainframe, verified the log trails, and ran diagnostics while the Keurig coughed up sludge for the product team. I was the first to log in, last to leave, and probably the only person who knew where all the electrical closets were without a floor plan. Called me the backbone once, maybe back in 2009. Now I was more like wallpaper, always there, always beige, and God help you if you tried to remove me without the whole place collapsing. Then came Miles. Miles, I sold an NFT of my cat Drummond, 33, vegan adjacent, with a master's in business yoga, or some such nonsense. He strutted into the Monday all-hands like a sponsored TED talk, hair slicked back like a villain from a bad fintech drama, sleeves rolled to show forearm tattoos of binary code he didn't understand. Innovation, people, he announced, grinning like a guy who used the word disruption as foreplay. It's time to bring North Range into the cloud era. He called me darling in front of the entire IT team. That's when I knew the countdown had started. At first, I thought maybe I was overreacting. I've been called worse. But then I heard it. During a lunch break, two interns whispering over Chipotle bowls like they were planning a coup. Old Root, one of them giggled. Like she's probably running COBOL in her dreams. They laughed, and I walked past like I didn't hear it. But I did, and it hit harder than I care to admit. Still, I kept showing up. Miles strutted around with his clickbait slide decks and started talking about deprecating the legacy architecture. This stuff's ancient, he said. Why are we still running anything on physical servers? I wanted to scream. Because the physical servers are the only reason your fancy front end even exists, you overcaffeinated PowerPoint lizard. But I just nodded. Let him hang himself with his own Ethernet cable. By Wednesday, he was talking about replacing the admin structure with a single sign-on system he found in a Reddit thread. We don't need dinosaurs, he said, smiling at me like I was already fossilized. We need innovators. Now, before I go any further, let me say this. If you're still listening and you haven't hit that little subscribe button or tapped a like on this thing, it'd mean a lot if you did. Not just for me, but for the poor bastards trying to keep stories like this from dying alone in the basement of the internet like an abandoned server rack. It keeps this strange little engine running. Thanks, sincerely. Anyway, I wish I could say I confronted him. That I stood up and gave a rousing speech about the sanctity of system integrity and how innovation without understanding is just vandalism. But I didn't. That's not my style. I just watched, listened, logged everything, took note of what he didn't know, and it was a long list. He didn't know the mainframe still held hard-coded permission hierarchies older than he was. He didn't know that if you deactivated my credentials, chain of failsafes would start quietly eating its own tail. And he sure as hell didn't know that Old Root was the only reason this whole circus hadn't burst into flame every time the coffee machine shorted out the breaker panel. So I waited. I smiled in meetings. I answered his emails with passive-aggressive precision. Per your request, I'd write, before executing changes that technically did what he asked, but left gaping holes for the vultures to find later. Never noticed. Too busy practicing his crypto pitch for the board or flirting with the new UX designer who thought root access was a new vegan dish. They say the quiet ones are the most dangerous. They're right. It started with a chuckle. Not even a real laugh, just that smug, nasal little exhale tech bros do when they think they've outwitted someone who still owns a landline. We were in the Thursday infrastructure meeting, sitting around the long table in Conference B, fluorescent lights flickering like they were about to confess something. Miles leaned back in his ergonomic throne and held up a printed page from my legacy documentation binder. This, he said, holding it between two fingers like it might give him tetanus, is basically the Rosetta Stone of North Range. Ancient scrolls. Does it come with a decoder ring? The room laughed. Not all of them. Not the ones who mattered. But enough. Marketing snickered. One of the junior devs choked on her La Croix. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just said, page 63 has the data retention policy your compliance team forgot to include in last year's audit. He didn't respond. Just dropped the binder onto the table with a thud like he was putting down a piece of meat he didn't order. That was the moment I started phase 1. See, there are two kinds of silence, the kind that screams and the kind that watches. Mine had shifted. I started reviewing every corner of the system I'd ever touched, which was pretty much all of it. Cron jobs, shell scripts, the fallback daemons, even the old UPS alert system that sent me texts whenever power dipped below 92%, I tightened everything. If it didn't need to breathe, I suffocated it. If it didn't need to be documented, I obfuscated it. And if I didn't trust someone to access it, I ghosted the entry entirely. Meanwhile, Miles was busy selling Kool-Aid to the board. He rolled out a PowerPoint, complete with swooping transitions and royalty-free trap music, titled Project Phoenix, Rebirthing North Range into the Future. You'd have thought he invented the damn cloud himself. His grand proposal: dismantle all on-prem systems within 6 months and move fully to a modular, decentralized serverless stack. When someone asked what that meant, he replied, agile synergy with zero legacy latency, which was just 5 words that meant absolutely nothing. I raised one hand. Quietly, respectfully. Miles, I said, if we drop the local redundancy on the warehouse side, the logistics API will time out across 5 states. We're not talking about lag. We're talking about shipments going to the wrong hemisphere. He smirked. Rita, with all due respect, innovation means breaking things. No, I said, innovation means understanding what you're breaking. He cut me off with a little wave. That same damn wave he gave when the janitor asked him to stop parking in the reserved spot. We'll take that under advisement, he said, turning to the CIO with a wink. You know how she is, resistant to change. The next morning, he sent out a company-wide memo. It didn't name me directly, but it might as well have had my photo stapled to it. As we embrace modern solutions, must recognize and overcome resistance to legacy thinking. Obsolete workflows may feel comfortable, but they shackle innovation. Let's move forward boldly. Shackle innovation. I damn near tore the monitor off the wall, but I didn't. I opened a terminal window instead. Began writing a little script I called Iris, named after the Greek goddess who delivered messages to the underworld. It was simple, elegant, and invisible, wrapped around the backup permission system, and mirrored my credentials into a private enclave. Something no one would notice unless they were really looking. No one was. Every time he mocked me in public, I locked down another node. Every time he smiled at me like I was an expired coupon, I deleted another admin override. I wasn't angry. I was surgical. Focused. A woman sharpening a scalpel no one thought she could still hold steady. And all the while, I watched the lights on the server rack. Blinking, waiting. Silent little metronomes counting down to the day this entire farce would eat itself alive. Because it wasn't fear I felt. It wasn't rage either, it was clarity. Cold, crystal, and absolute. The beauty of old code is that it doesn't scream when it's dying, it just stops answering. That's how I began the transfer, silent like snowfall, deliberate like a scalpel. Miles paraded around the open plan bullpen with his buzzword confetti. I spent the better part of 2 weeks crawling through the foundation of North Range like a ghost in the machine. I wasn't sabotaging anything. Not yet. I was reclaiming what was mine. It started with the scripts, not the flashy UI layer ones the interns played with, but the ancient beasts, Bash, Perl, some stray COBOL subroutines stitched together like Frankenstein's spine. These were the systems that triggered end-of-day reconciliations, backed up inventory logs, reset failover nodes, and crucially, handled permissions updates at midnight every Friday. They ran beneath the surface like arteries, and no one but me remembered how to read their pulse. I rerouted them. Every single one now reported to a private directory under my user ID, hidden in plain sight, misnamed like an old onboarding temp folder from 2011. Even gave it the same timestamp as a defunct HR policy doc, so if anyone did scan metadata, it'd look too boring to poke at. No alarms tripped, no logs flagged. The system didn't complain because the system still trusted me. And trust, real trust, is just prolonged laziness with a flattering name. I updated nothing in Confluence. I made no commits to the shared repo. I left behind just enough breadcrumb trails to confuse, not clarify, like the faint perfume of a long-gone passenger in an abandoned car. If someone ever went looking, they'd find the bones, but no cause of death. Meanwhile, Miles celebrated the purge. He stood on a chair in the bullpen on Wednesday afternoon and shouted, "Legacy's dead, baby," before ceremonially deleting 3 old admin accounts in the system while a junior dev played some kind of fanfare music from his phone. They clapped, grinned like Caesar crossing the Rubicon on a hoverboard. But he didn't delete mine. "Keep Rita's login for now," he said casually. "She still knows where the weird crap lives." He thought he was being magnanimous. I knew better. He just hadn't figured out how deeply embedded I was. I was no longer a user in the system. I was the system. And the more he deleted, the more I absorbed. The funny thing is, he thought he was winning. That's what made it beautiful. He strutted past my desk one day, sipping some Technicolor smoothie like his pancreas was on a dare. "Hey, darling," he smirked. "Appreciate you holding down the fort while we innovate. Promise we'll get you a rocking chair for the break room soon." I didn't look up. Just nodded, murmured, "Better make it grounded," and went back to adjusting the DNS failover script that would one day let me vanish the entire internet if I felt so inclined. At this point, I had one foot out the door and the other halfway to heaven. The work didn't feel like work anymore. It was ritual, like embalming something already dead. The only real emotion I felt was a kind of clinical amusement, watching them all chase their tails around cloud certifications and sprint cycles, completely unaware that the floor beneath them wasn't code, it was me. You ever watch someone delete a tripwire and smile like they invented fire? That's what this was becoming. Miles and his little crew moved fast and broke things, but they didn't know what they were breaking. They thought old code was just inconvenient, like a landline. But old code has a memory, and mine remembered everything. There was a moment, I think it was a Tuesday, when I realized something dangerous. I wasn't angry anymore. I was calm, detached, like a surgeon staring at the tumor and deciding with complete peace that it's time to cut. Audience doesn't know it yet, but something's coming. You can feel it, can't you? That vibration beneath the story. That low, humming tension like fluorescent lights right before they burst. That's not your imagination. That's the system waking up. The town hall was supposed to be about quarterly projections, but Miles turned it into open mic night for his ego. Everyone was crammed into the auditorium, marketing in their ironic hoodies, finance in their stiff collars, engineers pretending they didn't hate fluorescent lighting. I sat in the back, same seat I'd taken for 27 years, trying to pretend the stale donut glaze on my fingers wasn't the highlight of my morning. Miles strutted onto the stage with a wireless mic like he was about to drop a new crypto album. He started with buzzwords: synergy, cloud-first future, architectural modernization, the verbal equivalent of packing peanuts. People nodded along. Loved that. Then someone asked about the downtime planned for the warehouse system migration. A real question. A grown-up question. The kind that deserved an actual answer. Instead, he smiled that condescending smile, the one that made me want to replace his ergonomic chair with a folding metal one, and said, "Oh, don't worry. We're streamlining everything, even our legacy personnel. Time for Rita to enjoy retirement before she breaks a hip." Laughter wasn't universal, but it was enough. A few snorts, a giggle from the interns. Someone muttered old root under their breath, and there it was, that hot, hollow thud in the chest you get when you realize you're not a person to them anymore. Your material, a prop, a punchline. I didn't look at Miles. I looked at the CEO. He didn't even blink, just stared at the financial projections behind Miles like he was trying to calculate whether ignoring me would save him more money than acknowledging me. He didn't intervene, didn't cough, didn't shift in his chair. Just let the insults slide off his expensive suit like I'd never existed. That was the moment something in me snapped, not loudly, not dramatically. It was quiet. A soft, internal click, like a lock turning. The rest of the town hall blurred. Remember lights buzzing, people talking, chairs scraping, the faint reek of someone's leftover microwaved fish drifting through the vents. All of it washed past me in a gray current. I wasn't in the room anymore. I was already gone. That night, I sat alone at my desk long after the cleaning crew left, lit only by the terminal glow. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I navigated to a folder no one knew existed, a private archive I'd kept for years. Inside it was a single file, handover final zip. The one containing the only complete, updated documentation for the entire administrative ecosystem. My ecosystem. The company's heartbeat. It was the only map through the labyrinth. I highlighted it, pressed delete. The system asked, "Are you sure?" I clicked yes. No backup, no redundancy. Gone like it never existed. And in the silence that followed, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades: resolve. Cold, clear, absolute. I realized I was done saving people who didn't see me. Done patching systems for executives who didn't know what they were risking. Done being the quiet backbone while the company gnawed through its own vertebrae. They wanted modernization. Fine. They could rebuild everything without the woman who held the instructions. Walking out of the building, I didn't look back. Didn't touch the walls I used to lean on. Didn't say goodnight to the security guard. Night air felt strange on my skin, like the world was reminding me I had one. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was finished. Friday at 6:01 p.m., I shut the drawer on my desk for the last time. It made that old groan, the one I used to hear every night at closing. Only this time, it wasn't a promise of tomorrow. It was a tombstone click. The office was emptying out like bathwater down a rusted drain. Laughter by the elevators. Sounds of weekend plans. Someone ordering tacos on speakerphone. None of them noticed me slide my worn-out coffee mug into a tote bag and power down my terminal. No speeches. No hugs. No sad little cupcake send-off in the break room with a card that said, "We'll miss you," next to 20 signatures that looked like prescription refills. Just the quiet hum of a server room down the hall and the final flick of a switch. Logout complete. I removed my badge from the lanyard. Set it gently on the desk. Not dramatically, just deliberately. Like a key placed in a lock you no longer intend to use. The monitor went black. My reflection in the screen didn't look triumphant. Didn't look broken either. Just done. What they didn't know, and wouldn't know until it was far too late, was that I hadn't walked out empty-handed. Not in the digital sense. No, I didn't steal company secrets or download confidential spreadsheets into some hidden drive. I didn't need to. My knowledge was the system. My fingerprints were on every layer of logic beneath their shiny dashboards and single sign-on illusions. I was the spine they mistook for scaffolding, and they just amputated it without checking for backup brain. But I didn't tell them that. Instead, I walked out through the side stairwell, my stairwell, past the dusty emergency binder I'd written in 03, the one still labeled in my handwriting. Past the vending machine that only took exact change. Past the plaque commemorating our 5-year uptime streak, which I'd single-handedly kept alive through brownouts, memory leaks, and one very drunk software architect who tried to optimize our firewall at 2 a.m. No one followed me. My phone buzzed once around 9:13 p.m. I recognized the number. Jared, junior sysadmin, sweet kid. Always brought me a Twix when he needed something decrypted. Probably the only one who still used semicolons correctly. The voicemail started before the ring finished. "Hey, Rita. I think something's not right with the access logs and, well, I was wondering if you could maybe blocked. Not out of cruelty, out of necessity. I needed silence." I spent the rest of the evening barefoot on my porch, cold drink sweating into my palm, the sky above me black as an unpatched server. No alerts, no pings, no 3 a.m. Slack messages begging me to fix what some mid-level visionary broke by accident. Just the sound of cicadas and my breathing finally syncing with the earth again. They would assume I just walked away, that I let go. They had no idea what I took with me, because sometimes revenge isn't an explosion. Sometimes it's just turning off the lights and watching everyone fumble. And when the darkness comes Monday morning, they'll scream for help. But old Root won't answer. Monday arrived like a boot to the teeth. Miles strutted into the office 15 minutes late, rocking a new hoodie that said "Disrupt Everything" in some faux minimalist font, holding a green smoothie the color of envy. His sunglasses stayed on until the second-floor hallway. He'd just returned from saving a blockchain orphanage. The team was already gathered in the bullpen, heads down, screens glowing. Only, nothing was working. Not at the terminals, not in the admin console, not on mobile, not via VPN. Just a chorus of frustrated keyboard taps, faces twisted in that uniquely tech world panic, the kind that comes when nothing makes sense and the clock is already bleeding money. "Okay, what's the holdup?" Miles asked, setting his smoothie down next to someone's half-eaten kwasa. "Today's the big day, people. Phoenix 1.0 launch. Let's go." No one spoke. Jared looked up from his laptop, pale and blinking. We're locked out." "Locked out?" Miles laughed. "What, like passwords? Just do a reset." "Come on, guys." "No," someone else muttered. "Everything's returning error messages. Even the root shell." Miles frowned, rolled his chair over to the main control rig, the same one I'd configured over a decade ago. The terminal blinked at him like a tired eye. He typed something. Hit enter. Nothing but a blinking cursor and 5 words that, in any other context, might have sounded poetic. Permission denied. Primary admin not found. The air turned electric. He tried again and again. Same result. He opened another shell, this one going deeper, trying to brute force in through the dev sandbox. It failed. Even backup scripts were routed to null responses. Permission denied. Permission denied. Primary admin not found. Each failed attempt was a hammer strike against the illusion that they'd ever been in control. By 9:47 a.m., someone from logistics called in a panic. Shipments were frozen in 6 states. Barcode systems wouldn't scan. Orders couldn't be pulled. The front end of the site was up, but every time a customer tried to check out, same phrase looped in the back-end logs. Access request rejected. The real fun started when legal called from their East Coast office and said, "Why is the finance portal returning a 403 error?" Then the CEO walked in, confused, reading Slack threads on his phone as if they were written in ancient Sumerian. "Miles," he asked, slowly, "who had the key?" Miles, pale now, ran a hand through his hair like he could massage answers from his scalp. It was Rita. "We have backups, and she's gone," the CEO snapped. "Didn't you migrate control like you said you would?" I thought I did," he muttered. At 10:12 a.m., someone finally thought to check the server room. Probably Jared. He was always a few IQ points above the rest, even if he couldn't grow facial hair yet. He walked down the hall, past the janitor cart, past the framed poster that still listed me as employee of the quarter Q2 2010. Server room was silent. Lights blinking, machines humming like monks in prayer. Everything was running, but no one had the key. And there on the console desk, like a punchline written in origami, sat a single sticky note, folded carefully, not scribbled or tossed, but creased like a paper crane with its wings clipped. It didn't say anything, just blank yellow paper folded into the shape of a lock. No name, no signature, just the shape of what they'd lost. Miles stared at it for a full minute when Jared brought it back, turned it over like it might reveal a hidden clue or a passphrase he could chant to resurrect the god of sysadmin's past. But the message wasn't in the paper. The message was the absence. That's when he knew it wasn't a glitch, wasn't a bug. It was the system closing the door behind me. Miles unraveled fast. By 10:45 a.m., he was pacing the bullpen like a coked-up Roomba, bumping into desks, knocking over water bottles, yanking headsets off junior devs like they were defibrillator pads. "There's gotta be an override. Somewhere," he barked, voice cracking, eyes wild. "Where's the override? Who the hell let this happen?" He turned on DevOps like a rabid dog. "Did you idiots not migrate the root keys like I told you?" One of the DevOps guys, Phil, I think, the one with the unfortunate man bun and a voice like a dying accordion, stood up slowly and said, "Told us you'd handle the transition personally. Said it was your baby. Remember?" Miles lunged like he was about to throw a stapler. "Well, obviously I was delegating. HR got involved next. I wasn't there to see it, but I know the drill. When tech guys start sweating through their branded vests and executives start dropping acronyms like NAPALM, SLA, IPO, OUD, HR kicks into damage control mode. They dialed my cell. It rang once. Twice. Straight to voicemail. "Hi, this is Rita. If this is an emergency, it probably means you ignored my documentation for the past 15 years. Good luck." Legal shot me an email with the subject line urgent. System access, flagged at high priority. Too bad I'd already blackholed that entire domain over the weekend. It bounced. Meanwhile, upstairs in the fishbowl boardroom, the CEO was being briefed by a small army of people with clipboards and sweat stains. Miles tried to spin it as a temporary authentication bottleneck, said the new system was still stabilizing. The CEO didn't buy it. He looked around the room, slow and heavy, like a man hunting for the snake that just bit him. Then he asked the only question that mattered. Who had root? Silence. Then, finally, one name, Rita. That's when the room cracked in half. I wasn't there, of course. I was on my porch, rocking slowly, sun crawling across my feet, mug of black coffee in one hand, tablet in the other, watching North Range's stock ticker stutter like a skipping record. Blog chatter started whispering. Investor forums lit up, North Range backend outage, customer orders frozen, anyone else seeing this? System breach or misfire? The numbers dipped. Not a crash, not yet, but a tremor. And it only takes one tremor to shake loose the mask. I smiled, not the cartoon villain kind. Just a soft, private smile. The kind you save for when you've finally exhaled after holding your breath for too many years. Because here's the thing they never asked, never bothered to ask. What happens when the last person holding the map decides to set it on fire? Flashback. 2 months earlier, I sat at my terminal one night with a thought in my head that wouldn't leave. What if they delete me? Not figuratively. Literally. What if one day, some new boss with a man bun and a PowerPoint decides that my credentials are legacy bloat and purges me from the system? So I wrote a safeguard. A recursive fail lock embedded deep inside the permissions kernel. Small, elegant, invisible unless you were tracing the audit logs with a microscope, and 2 weeks to spare. The moment my ID was deactivated, not resigned, not logged out, but deleted, it would trigger a silent cascade. First, would revoke every redundant admin credential that hadn't been used in 90 days. Then it would relabel the primary root user as a ghost account, non-editable, non-visible to front-end users. Finally, it would hardwire the system response to any access attempt that didn't come from my encrypted key pair. Permission denied. Primary admin not found. Not a bug, not a hack, just logic. Cold, clean logic. And now they were living inside that logic, trapped in a machine that no longer believed they existed. Miles screamed something about rollback protocols. Jared tried to explain that the backups were mapped to a vault only my credentials could open. Phones rang like alarm bells. Someone knocked over a monitor. A delivery guy from DoorDash showed up looking for Mike with a burrito bowl, and Miles told him to go to hell. And I just rocked quietly, sipped my coffee, listened to the birds. They could scream all they wanted. The system had already whispered goodbye. The emergency board session started before sunrise. By 6:45 a.m. Tuesday, every suit within a 3-state radius was crammed into the upstairs war room, clutching burnt coffee and panic like rosary beads. Phones buzzed nonstop. Half the team had flown in overnight, red-eyed and sour, after waking to the headline from some tech blog that should have never known anything. North Range Systems experiences massive back-end failure sources say legacy admin missing. The CFO was already mid-tantrum when the recording started. Red-faced, waving printouts like they were subpoenas. Do you people understand what a goddamn $250,000 an hour looks like in losses? He bellowed, slamming the table. Inventory frozen. Vendor pipelines offline. Stripe flagged us. Stripe? Miles looked like a cartoon left in the microwave too long, melting, twitching, wild-eyed and stammering. We have backups. We have protocols. We need time to isolate the override. Isolate this, the CFO snapped, flinging a folder across the table. It skidded to a stop in front of the CEO. The CEO opened it, stared, silent. Inside were access logs and audit trails, blank, empty handshakes, failed authentications, one handwritten note from Jared at the bottom. All backup vaults require legacy root key for decryption. Maintained solely by user, rgrant/RK Grant. The room fell quiet. The CEO looked up. Where's Rita? Miles mumbled something about trying to call her. No, the CEO said. Get her on the phone. Now. At 7:11 a.m., my phone buzzed. I was on my porch again. Same coffee, different mug, this one chipped. That I survived Y2K and all I got was this mug. The air was cool. Birds chirped in the honeysuckle bush. Somewhere in the distance, someone's sprinkler sputtered to life. I let it ring 4 times, then I answered. Rita, came the CEO's voice. Sharp, clipped, strained through a throat not used to pleading. We need your help. I said nothing. Just let the silence stretch. Let him sit in it, let him feel it. Finally, I spoke. I retired, I said softly. That includes fixing your mistakes. He coughed, tried to regain control. There's a situation. We're in the middle of resolving it, but your access is critical to recovery. We'll compensate you appropriately. I sipped my coffee. $15,000 an hour. Excuse me, you heard me. $15,000 an hour, no W-2, consultant contract, prepaid, you get 2 hours per day. No weekends, no emergencies, I don't answer after 5. There was a rustling sound on the other end. He was probably covering the mic to whisper to someone. Then, that's rather aggressive, Rita. So was calling me a liability in front of 2 departments, I replied, and letting a frat house mascot delete my credentials without reading the damn infrastructure map. He hesitated. Let us just take this to legal. Let's talk terms. I ended the call. Didn't hang up hard. Didn't slam it. Just tapped the screen and set it face down on the table beside me. The birds kept chirping. Inside their war room, chaos likely returned. The CFO probably screamed. Miles almost certainly wet himself metaphorically, if not literally, because now they weren't just fighting a system failure. They were fighting time and ego, and the growing realization that their savior was a woman they dismissed, humiliated, and erased without asking what she knew or what she'd built. Had a choice: swallow their pride or rebuild from scratch. And maybe, just maybe, they were starting to realize that I had been the only system worth trusting all along. But they'd taken too long. Now the clock belonged to me. At 8:03 a.m. Tuesday morning, the mainframe hummed back to life. No alarms, no server crashes, no last-minute heroics with wet cables and prayer. Just a quiet, perfect boot cycle. Lights flickered green in the rack rooms. APIs began responding like obedient soldiers after a long mutiny. Logistics feeds trickled back into place, one heartbeat at a time. And then, across every terminal, monitor, kiosk, and workstation, whether in Ohio, Omaha, or Osaka, a single line appeared. White text on black screen. No logo, no cursor, just 5 words. You wanted innovation. Now you get silence. It stayed there for 13 seconds. Then the screens faded to black. In the war room, the board sat frozen. No one breathed. No one touched a thing. Phones buzzed quietly but went unanswered. Miles stood at the corner of the table, twitching, blinking fast, the collar of his hoodie damp with sweat. He tried to speak earlier, tried to explain something about test environments and false positives. But the words died somewhere behind his molars. The CEO stared at the wall. Then, finally, he asked, a voice like someone repeating a prayer they never believed in. Who had the key? No one answered, because they all knew, and because saying her name out loud would only make it worse. At 11:56 a.m., 2 security guards entered the bullpen with quiet shoes and stony faces. They didn't say you're fired. They didn't hand Miles a box. They didn't need to. He looked up, startled, then down, then back at the boardroom where no one met his gaze, not even the HR director. Especially not her. He left without a word, hoodie slung over one shoulder, that smug strut replaced by the awkward shuffle of a man who finally realized he'd been building his empire on sand someone else controlled. The systems remained online, mostly, but every few hours, some minor function would flicker, just long enough to make a manager sweat. An audit trail would vanish. A permissions queue would reroute, silent reminder that the backbone they'd amputated had been holding more than they'd ever understood. The CTO role was quietly posted on LinkedIn in the next week. Under desired qualifications, someone had typed, "Deep familiarity with legacy systems a plus." Meanwhile, somewhere far from the war rooms and buzzwords and blinking cursor errors, I sat in a lawn chair beneath an old oak tree, watching squirrels chase each other across a power line. Small cooler sat at my feet. The local radio played some crackly blues station. I didn't bring my phone outside anymore. I didn't need to. The world could break without me now. But before I stopped checking for good, I opened one final file from an old thumb drive, just out of curiosity. An archived export from North Range's HR database, back when I'd helped them migrate from Lotus Notes to a half-baked SAW solution some VP's nephew had pitched. There it was. User, R. Grant, display name, RK. Grant, date of hire, 1996, admin level, system root, HR notes. Null, no emergency contact. No middle name, not even a birth date. No one had ever asked what the K stood for. They never thought they'd need to, but it didn't matter now. Not to me, because when they deleted me, they didn't just lose a person. They lost the only one who ever had the key.